Welcome to HACE's 2023 National Leadership Summit. We are excited to engage with you in conversation as we take a deeper dive in this year's theme, HACEUnited, Accelerating Equity with Action and Accountability. Be sure to engage, to share your input, and most importantly, build the meaningful connections. All right. Buenos días. Good morning. So good to be here. So great to see new and familiar faces. So welcome to each and every one of you. We are going to kick off with our Cafecito con HACE, una charla, una plática, a conversation with our new board chair, Alina Moran.
Welcome, everyone. So excited to be here, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you. The long history of HACE is why I decided to join Patricia on this mission, and so thank you very much for being here.
Muy bien. So you guys ready to get started? Yeah. All right. So I hope you have your cafecito. And if you all know anything about cafecito, what's the first question we usually ask? ¿Cómo te gusta tu café, Alina?
So I like it light and sweet, I guess, unlike others. So that's the way I usually like it. It's a way to make sure that it reminds me of my mom and being home. We used to dip crackers in it, so I always like it light and sweet.
La concha, me gusta panecito. Alina, so it's so great to be here and have a conversation, to welcome you all. I've just, been really taking it all in, especially these days, and really just being grateful, right, that we have a day that we get to be here with one another and just really get to engage. And one of the greatest things that I love about HACE is just the connections, the meaningful connections, but the storytelling, right, which is so critical, that we want each and every one of you to make sure that you're sharing your story. And part of our Cafecito con HACE is making sure when we have our special guests, they're sharing their story, how they got to where they are. So Alina, you are running Dignity Health Hospital. You're based out of Los Angeles. How did you tell us about your cultural background, how you got to where your role is today?
Thank you. So for me, it really began with my parents. My parents migrated here from Puerto Rico in the 1960s, so for our Boricuas out there. And they really instilled in me the sense of making sure that education was in the forefront, right? They both had very limited education, really second and third grade of education. And so for my brother and myself, it was always about education, and it was always about giving back to our community. They felt really strongly about service and making sure that you thought about yourself outside of your family, but also how you can impact your community. And so from those roots, it really helped me to propel myself, being the first person in my family to graduate from college, being the first person to think about what type of career did I want to have, right? Moving away from what was skilled labor at that point in time, most of my family, to actually going into a professional career. And I think one of the things that that really connects me to HACE and its mission, it's really that it's serving to be able to do that for others. And so that perspective is so important, because for me, those are the things that helped me to propel, right? It wasn't easy to be able to be the first person to graduate from college, right? I didn't have any role models. I didn't have anyone telling me what to do, right? When I had to do my homework, most of that time I was doing my homework by myself. But programs like HACE really helped to accelerate. And so now, I have the privilege and honor of serving a very diverse community in downtown Los Angeles. Really our patient base, I call it a tale of three cities, because we're serving, our immigrant families that are coming from South and Central Los Angeles. We're serving unhoused patients that are living in Skid Row, which is literally 5 minutes from my hospital. And then, we're dealing with the gentrification that's happening in Los Angeles, right? Downtown dwellers that are paying $3 million for their apartments in downtown Los Angeles. And so that's really our patient population, but what really grounds me is that sense of health equity. I want to make sure that the services that we provide, everyone can obtain access to those services. And so that really drives me and makes sure that I know exactly what my meaning is every time I walk into the hospital. So that's my why, to make sure that as immigrants and coming from an immigrant family, that my patients and their family members get the same level of high quality healthcare service that anyone can get, right? Whether you're coming to our hospital or you're going to Cedars, that level of care is always there. So that's what grounds me, and that's why I love the work that we do each and every day.
That's so wonderful. And this theme, right, you touched on it this year that we're talking about is part of the storytelling that we want everybody to share, right? That there's so much diversity, whether you are first gen, or our community also has second, third, fourth, fifth generation in this country. Whether you speak Spanish or not, or Spanglish, right? And understanding that diversity that we bring, and also being, from myself, right, the daughter of immigrants, first generation, Latina, Mexican American, are really core to who I am, and how are we leveraging those unique cultural identities, how we choose to identify, to lead authentically, right? And so this year's theme is around accelerating equity with action and accountability. It's understanding that in order to build more inclusive, equitable workspaces, this is leadership. It's taking the time to understand self, which then helps strengthen and help become more self-aware, helps strengthen how you're connecting with others, no matter what your background, right? And we want to be able to accelerate that not only with HACE, but with everyone, right? So that we're closing some of these widening gaps. So what does that mean for you as it pertains to building equity? And maybe any recommendations that you have for folks on how do they think about that for themselves?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I've always learned is that you could be a leader in whatever space you're in, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that as a CEO, I have more power than other people in the room, really, because in whatever space you're in, being able to bring your culture, your experience, who you are as a person, is gonna distinguish yourself in the workplace, but it's also gonna help you live that authentic life that Patricia mentioned, right? Because people understand that authenticity, and they understand how important it is. And for me, really leading and accelerating equity, inclusion, belonging is really around making sure that you have diverse people at the table, right? And so in whatever role you have, if you have an opportunity to engage talent, if you have an opportunity to bring others to the table, that's really what we need to do to be able to accelerate that conversation. And if you are in a situation where maybe you're the highest level Latino or Latina in your organization, what are you doing to bring programs like HACE? What are you doing to make sure that we're starting employer resource groups? All those things are important to be able to accelerate the conversation and ensure that people feel valued, respected in their organizations. And sometimes, there are times where I was in a particular organization and I didn't feel valued and respected, and I chose to make the decision to leave, right? Because I knew my self-worth and I knew what I needed to do to accelerate my career. And that's a scary thought, right? When I told my parents that I was leaving my job, pero ¿qué? What? Do you have another job? Not really. But it's just, those are the tough decisions that you have to make, because part of the ability to bring others forward is to understand your own self-value.
Leading by example, for sure. And so we're here, we've got limited time with you this morning because we've got a lot of great sessions lined up and events and things like that for today and tomorrow. And there's specific tracks, right, and content and speakers that we're sharing around diversity, equity, and inclusion, around hiring practices, around being able to, gain development for your own self. So we want you to take it all in and make sure that you're engaged, that you're present, that we are in the state of being, not just here to be here, but we're truly engaging with one another, taking tips, taking notes, sharing. We want you're here, and we want you to feel that how grateful we are that you are here. So, Alina, what recommendations or tips do you have for folks to make the best out of today, tomorrow, as they're going through the sessions and engaging with one another?
Absolutely. Well, as Patricia mentioned, it's all about building connections, right? So whether it's a new connection or whether it's actually maintaining and fortifying the relationships that you have, right? This is your great opportunity to network. It's a great opportunity to look at all of the different different sessions, right? You don't necessarily need to stay within your own track, right? If you feel that there's this particular session that seems to be exciting to you, take that opportunity to delve deeper into that subject matter, right? Look at the speakers, make sure that you're engaging with individuals. But most of all, keep yourself open to new ideas, right? So everyone networks in a different way. Some people can network, go into a room and meet 100 people, and that's great, right? And there's others where that's not their style, and that's okay, right? It's okay to do one-to-one connections. It's okay to, be at a session where you're at a table and just introduce yourself to those people. That's making connections. And for me, it's really about keeping yourself open to new ideas, building those connections, and making sure that you're taking advantage of this wonderful time here that we have together to really understand both the mission of HACE, but then how can you contribute to that, and how can you accelerate action from this regard.
Absolutely. How many of you, this is your first summit for HACE? Okay.
Ooh,
quite a few.
Awesome.
Well, welcome, lots of new faces. And as Alina mentioned, we have these sessions that are going on. The afternoon after the luncheon conversation, we're going to have TED Talk style authors that will be coming and presenting. But we're going to throw back the work to you all because we're going to have facilitated discussions at your table. So we want to make sure that whatever you want to get out of it, that you put it down, you note it. If any of you do yoga, right, it's like, what is that intention that you have? Like, put it in your mind right now, write it down what you need to do, and make sure that as you engage throughout the 2 days that you're able to get whatever goal that you have from these 2 days. We have some special events and celebrations too that we have going on. So I know this afternoon after our sessions, we're having a happy hour, right? So we'll be celebrating our 2022 graduates. So do we have our graduates in the room from this year? All right, we got some few. So we'll be celebrating them as well. And then tomorrow, also with our annual gala, celebrating other awardees. Our quinceañera, how did I forget? Mujeres de HACE in the room. We're celebrating the 15th anniversary tomorrow with the brunch and then the gala in the evening as well. And so we want to open it up for any questions that you may have before we let you all go into the sessions, or for Alina. Any right there.
What are maybe 3 leadership values you feel like have helped you develop in your role?
3 leadership values that help you develop in your role.
I think for me, I would just say integrity. So for me, being authentic and being able to share your message in a way that resonates with others is important, right? So Patricia mentioned storytelling. I feel like storytelling is so important, especially when you want to share the why of why you're doing something, especially when you're leading a team. So integrity is important. For me, really, it's about being visionary. So sometimes as a leader, we tend to think about what's exactly in front of us, right? That tactical approach. But sometimes teams need to understand where they're going, right? And so to be able to clearly state, this is the why, right? This is why we're doing this. And to be able to do that is important. And I think the third one is really around, I would say it's a little bit different than integrity, but it's authenticity, right? So when I make it a point of going to new employee orientation every month, right? And I share with my new individuals that are coming into the organization that they're really ambassadors of the hospital, right? That they're really here to serve our community, right? And it's all of our community, right? And they need to be comfortable in that space, right? And so I share my story of being an immigrant person, my family not having access to healthcare, right? And the struggles that we went to in getting basic healthcare services, and why it's important for us to continue our mission as a hospital, right? And they, for some, that resonates for them, right? Because they either had a similar experience or because they understand that deep, that's my why, right? That's why I come to the hospital every day. And so that authenticity is so important as a leader, right? And even in terms of the work that you do, it's important to make sure that you understand your self-value and that you're able to portray that to others. So hopefully I gave you some good tips there.
Such a great question. Values are your foundation, I really believe, on when it comes to making tough decisions, when you're going through some challenging times, is leaning into those values that help, strengthen you as a leader and make those right calls. So I think we have a question here and then there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so how, as the leader and an executive in your company, how do you handle and or approach work-life balance?
Promote, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
How do you handle or approach work-life balance?
That's a great question. I think I would never say it's balance. I think it's opportunities where you lean into what's important, right? I would just say that I have a very supportive husband and partner, and sometimes I have to make decisions in which I am doing more for the organization that potentially I'm doing more from a family perspective. But that balances out, right? I've always had conversations, very frankly, with anyone that I'm reporting to around that life-work balance from the perspective of if I need to get home to be able to be with my children, that's equally as important to me as the work that I do at work. So once, and especially when they were younger, I would put them to bed and then I would get on my computer and finish that assignment, right? Finish that presentation, because I valued that work, balance as well, but it isn't necessarily 50-50. It's always an opportunity where I'm learning and growing. The last 3 years, because of the pandemic, have been extremely stressful for healthcare workers, right? And so that is even more in the forefront, really thinking about your own mental health and how do you deplug from things has been equally important. So for me, that life balance is really around the time that I spend with family, but then also the time that I spend giving myself self-care and understanding that I need to recharge in order for me to be there for both work and family.
Really being in tune with your own self, your own needs, right? That's critical. We have a question over there.
Yes, a question from our virtual audience, Ramona Vela. Any ideas on how we can elevate our ERG's participation or involvement?
No, I think that's a great question. I think for me, the most important is making sure that that exists in an organization. And then if it does exist, how do you make sure that their work is elevated and appreciated in the organization? So there's a lot of, like I mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities to be able to use those employer resource groups, not only from the perspective of creating awareness of their individual ethnicity or their individual path, but also helping them to lead efforts, serve as focus groups for maybe new programs or new initiatives at the within your organization. There's opportunities to really understand how do you pair those individuals with sponsors or mentors in the organization so that way they're able to kind of elevate themselves through the organization, helping them to pair them up with programs like HACE where it could help them to increase their tools and resources that they need to be able to succeed. Those are a few things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know we have a lot of great BRG, ERG leaders here throughout the summit and the sessions, and so I would definitely make sure that you're jumping into those sessions and asking them as well, because I know there's going to be a lot of great tips and nuggets and stories that folks that are leading their own BRGs, ERGs within the organization, you'll get to hear today and tomorrow. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Did we get anyone over here? Sorry. I kept... Oh, okay. Sorry.
As a Latina and as a woman, how did you work to develop an authentic leadership style when, especially in healthcare, you don't see a lot of women of color in leadership?
No, that's a great question. So for me, I'll tell you a story where, I went to a conference, and at the conference, it was a conference for hospital presidents. And at that time, I was working in New York. And when I entered the room, I went to register at the table, and one of the register individuals was like, "I think you're at the wrong place." And I was like, "Oh, why do you think that?" And she's like, "Well, this is a conference for hospital presidents." And, clearly she looked at me like, "You're not one of those." And so that, I think, you are authentic in your ability to withstand those types of conversations and be able to share your story, right? So I was like, well, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Alina Moran, and I'm the president of XY organization. Things are changing in this, in this world, right? And people like me actually can be at the table and can do those things, right? And of course, she was aghast and very apologetic for, thinking that way. But I took it as an opportunity for, for her to learn, right? That spaces are changing. And that's why it's important for us to be at the table. I would say it's not an easy thing, right? It's still very much, when I go to a conference, I'm probably one of 5 women, and I'm definitely the only Latina at the table. And so for me, that, what I mentioned before, integrity, authenticity, being able to lead with that is so important to me. I know that I need to be at that table, and even though sometimes it's an uncomfortable space, I need to be there in order to raise awareness, especially as the majority of this, of this world is going Hispanic and Latino-X, right? It's so important for us to make sure that we have individuals at the table that are able to support that work. In many states, they are cutting back on benefits for individuals, right? Especially immigrant individuals that do not have, that are not necessarily documented. And so for me, that's my passion. That's why I do this every day. But I would just say sometimes it's not an easy path. But if I don't do it, who else is going to do it?
Yeah, and when I hear that story, it's so inspirational, Alina. I think, which is why I hear a lot of folks that are involved, whether with HACE or other community type organizations, to be part of your support, your folks that you can go in and have these candid conversations so that you're not always feeling so isolated, right? And so that's such a great question. And we're also part of the same Latina sorority, so I think that's been another circle of ours that we constantly have leaned into over the years, and especially when I first met you, because it was a circle of Latina professionals and just support network, right, that I think are so critical to aid in your support. So I know we had your question.
Yeah. One question for me is, as a Latino male, it was hard for me to actually not share the spotlight, but share the responsibilities at home with my wife. She's a professional as well. And I think, personally, do you think that companies should be putting more emphasis on, like, not summits, but like teaching men to share the responsibilities at home? I have 2 children. I drop both my kids off now at daycare and school, and she goes directly to work. Before it was flipped. It was all, my career came first. And now we're kind of sharing that. Do you anticipate us as leaders, Latinos and Latinas, to go out and tell our Hispanic men and Latino men that, hey, it's okay to share the responsibility, it's okay to take care of the work at home?
Love that question.
Yeah, no, thank you for being vulnerable and actually saying that. So I think for me, it's twofold, right? So organizations need to understand that when we're talking about paternity care, when we're talking about sick care, that it isn't related just to the women, right? Sometimes those benefits are very particular to female workers, and you don't necessarily have the same level of benefits for male workers, right? So the ability to make sure that if you are in the HR space, that you're actually advocating for that, right? So any type of leave, whether it's medical, whether it's related to child care, should be equal across the organization for both men and women. I think for us, it's twofold. One, it's making sure that we're teaching our children that has to happen, right? Because the best role models that our children have are us, right? And so we need to begin ingraining in them that men and women do the same thing, right? That they can stay at home, that they can be responsible for household chores, right? That it doesn't always fall on the women, right? And part of that is cultural, how we were raised, right? And so we always have to lean against that a little bit at times to make sure that we're being successful. I think organizations have a place in making sure that benefits are the same, but I do think that a lot of the things that we're talking about, and even concepts that we're having here about maybe hombres de HACE, right? How do you begin to have those conversations in a way where you have a safe space to be able to share that, right? Because people may not feel comfortable sharing that. But thank you for the question. I think it's a great opportunity to talk and dialogue about ways that we can support that conversation.
Which there will be in Hombres de HACE. Launching this May, in fact. Make sure you talk to the programs, and that's exactly the conversations that will be embedded throughout, providing that safe space so that our men and our families, and they're going through this program, can be vulnerable, can share that, and be that support as well. As we talk about leadership development, it starts with self, right? And if we can make sure that through programs like this, we're helping you get to that self-awareness, so that then it unleashes, right, the potential that we are set to do here at HACE. And so I do want to take a moment of gratitude and make sure that you all get to know who are the HACE board members in the room, the HACE staff. So please stand if you're here, because we want to make sure that people get to talk to you at some point in time. I'm looking at some of y'all and you're not standing yet. Okay. I was like, wave, John. them.
She'll start calling you out if you don't
So
do it.
I know some of them were running out because they have sessions, but yes, make sure you talk to them, get to know them, and interact throughout the today, tomorrow. And then my last question for you, Alina, is always, and I always like to ask folks is, what are you most hopeful for, but specifically for you coming on as our new incoming national board chair of HACE, what are you most hopeful for in terms of your term and for HACE this year and the years to come?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, we have such a solid foundation that we have with HACE, right? Over 40 years, right, of building and changing both the workplace, but also providing the tools and resources for Latinos to really advance in their career. So we were actually talking about this last night at our dinner table, kind of ideas and suggestions. So I think for me and for my Pineapple group, I have to put it out there. It's something that, you know, we talked about, you know, we've developed kind of this cycle of programs, right, that leads people all the way, and we just recently launched our Advanced Latino Leadership. But we're thinking about how do we prepare people to become part of C-suites, right? What are the tools and resources where we're able to do special types of programs for those individuals? And sometimes those have to be self-selected, right? Because we know that there's a lot of organizations that have programs where they're tapping certain individuals in the organization. But how about for those individuals that don't get tapped or haven't put into the opportunities where they can be tapped? How do we make sure that we have those resources? I also want to be able to really help to expand and put things together for our alumni. We have a lot of alumni through those 40 years that have graduated from programs. I would love to see something where we're specifically catering to those alumni and making sure that we're creating those connections. Because even the opportunity that we had last night as board members, just to be able to break bread and have those conversations are so important, and we need to be able to provide that space for our alumni. And of course, I'm just really ensuring that I'm supporting the program and that we think about our global outreach, right? What are the things that we can do to take programs like this outside of the United States? So those are some of the ideas. I know
Just a handful.
Just a handful of
Just a
ideas,
handful.
but I'm excited. You know, we have a 2-year term to be able to accomplish these things, and it's going to be something that we do collectively, and we need everyone at the table to help us to move the organization even further than it is today. But I'm excited, and I look forward to meeting every one of you here to make sure that we can hear from you what you think the organization needs. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I know we've got a few minutes before the next session, so I do want to release y'all so you can get to the workshops and the discussions. Thank you, Alina. Welcome to formally, right, to the HACE Board of Directors. We're proud, we're excited. Just from the conversations we were having with the board members last night, we've got a powerhouse group of board members that are just so passionate about what we're doing here. And we've come a long way, but we've got lots of work ahead of us, and look forward to sharing more throughout the 2 days. Bueno, I'll see you soon here at the luncheon. Please enjoy the rest of today's sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salud.